begin from the beginning. For one thing, I just make a side note. Pop would be proud of us because we're not truly running on Conway time today. We're early. On time. I want to thank you all for really, truly being here today for all of us. This is really, during a difficult time, losing a loved one is really one of the most difficult things, really, one can endure. And it's that much more magnified when it's a father or a mom. Really, no words can possibly express what my mom, my sister, and I really are feeling right now. And I'm sure it's only time that can help us with that healing and sense of acceptance. In the meantime, I'd like to reflect on the true spirit of the life of Philip Conway. Our dad celebrated 94 years. 94 years of wonderful life. 71 years of which, with his dear wife Elouise, and fatherhood, of course, to my sister and myself. Grandfatherhood came along. And it's nice to know that the Conway legacy lives on with Dad's spirit. I believe that Philip truly exemplified the true meaning of, well, living life to its fullest. Dad was born in South Orange, New Jersey, right near Morristown area, and he was raised with a strong passion for activities such as fishing, hunting, some golf, of course, and truly a load of outdoor life. These in turn carried on throughout his life, his passions, and became a bonding experience with both friends and family. And I'll just share just one quick little anecdote because he loved to tell about the story about his brother when he was 10. Dad was 10, his brother was 14-ish. And they had this neighbor that had trouble with what's called turkey buzzards in their yard. And turkey buzzards are kind of a big bird, but they have lovely tail feathers. Very good for tying flies. And the gentleman next door insisted that the boys come over and take care of these turkey buzzards. So they came over with their guns in hand. And they stalked these birds, jowl to jowl, and they got a few of them. Now the reason why I have to tell you why they were a little bit motivated. Mr. Thomas, I have to add who this gentleman was because I was quite, well, this was Mr. Seth Thomas of the Seth Thomas Clocks. But Mr. Thomas would pay $5 a tail feather bunch, meaning for every bird they get, they got $5. But that $5, remember, was in about 1930-ish. That was a lot of money for those boys to carry on there. Anyway, after attending Choate School and ultimately graduating from Princeton University, it was called Princeton College back then, coupled with officers training with the U.S. Army, Dad married his sweetheart, Elouise Wright, in May of 1941. They were a dynamic duo that complemented one another, and they were separated only when they had to be. And Elouise traveled with Philip across the nation during World War II to the various boot camps to train the men. And Mom likes to call it, also known as, and refers to, the College of Conway. It was an educational experience for all. Mom and Dad, both very active and vibrant people, they really excelled in whatever endeavor they took on. And specifically, more specifically, Dad, for his excellence in all aspects of life. Not only, of course, in having a career and raising a family, but also his golf game, and, of course, hunting, fishing, and some playing of bridge, with his esteemed partner by his side, Mums, when she was allowed. Mom respected these passions, but you know, there was a little, Mom respected his passions. And when Dad went out on Saturday and went hunting or fishing, he had better be home by 6 o'clock for cocktail hour and dinner at the club with friends, with Mums. That was a standing appointment. And you know what? He got up very early in the morning to be out there with those fish or those pheasant or quail or what have you. And he sometimes went alone, but he was back in time. Another life passion was his work. Like his father, William Palen Conway, Dad was a banker. He devoted a lifelong career to what is known as Citi Bank today. Something I've always admired about Dad is that whatever he set on to do on behalf of the bank, or whatever it was sure it was completed with great earnest. And that's why he had started, well, just to show, he started with the bank in 1946, and he didn't leave that bank until the mid-1970s. So a good 30 years of dedication. I want to tell you just a little story about Dad. Dad never talked about work. But he loved to tell this story, and it shows Dad had a sense of creating his own tradition in a way, even at the bank. And Dad worked for a gentleman who was he was the head guy back then. A guy by the name of Stillman Rockefeller. And Dad was his assistant vice president. And Stillman was of the old school. Stillman loved to wear these starched collars, separated collars on his shirts, much like mine, but mine's not separated. And a couple of mornings here and there, I guess Mr. Rockefeller had a certain idea in his head. My father would walk by, and Mr. Rockefeller would say, "Say, Phil!" And he'd say, "Yes, sir." He'd tap his collar and he'd say, "Get the habit, Phil." And Dad said, "Yes, sir." Well, guess what? Dad never got the habit. He stuck with his button-down Oxfords, and maybe later on in his career he might have pulled out a blue one, but they were always starched white. I love that story. And guess what? Dad loved to tell that story, in spite of everything. And I have to say, I'm going to mention something about my sister. My sister, I think we should call her Chip. She's kind of a chip off the old block in that regard for doing things in earnest, like my pop. My sister has a certain tenacity for taking care of business. Anyway, and Dad was, I envy the relationship in a way, because my dad was always very, it's the whole mothers and sons and fathers and daughters thing. That's just the way it is. As I've been told by certain counsel. Anyway, as far as being a grandfather, I asked my daughters and my nephews and what they remembered about their Gamps and Pop, as the boys call them. They all commented on his way with words and when he spoke, and they leaned in and listened carefully because it was always something of value. Kind of like the old famous slogan from the old brokerage house many of us might remember. When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. But anyway. The eldest, my eldest, Elizabeth, always remembered him as time flies on the porch of the camp, Creole camp, putting in the yard with his golf balls, and cooking away in the kitchen. Dad had a certain propensity for good cooking. And the smell of roast chicken wafting through the house